Why are you so sure they're not in the woods?
I have children, I have grandchildren, and I see what kids are like through the woods. There's no reason for any child to wander deep into the woods. There's just not. I think somebody hurt these kids. I think somebody hurt them.
This is what Belynda Gray, the biological grandmother of Lily and Jack Sullivan, said about the disappearance of their children. Her voice is one of the most anticipated, yet least heard, in this entire case. The voice from the side of the biological father. The side that, until now, has never released a statement. Never given an interview, never give allowed in. More than that, she speaks about how she was informed. She speaks about her son, and those connected to him. She speaks about how law enforcement handled her, and the people around her. And through that, her words draw a new frame around the case, raising questions not only about the people closest to Lily and Jack, but about the way this investigation has been handled, about the motives behind the silence, and about the real purpose behind the decisions that so many of us have questioned. The interview with Belynda Gray. Before the official updates, much of what the public believed about Cody Sullivan and his side of the family came from one thing: silence. In the early days following the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan, Cody's name was rarely, if ever, mentioned in media coverage. News reports, community posts, and video documentaries all centered around the mother, Malia Brooks Murray, and her partner, Daniel Martell. As a result, Cody's presence in his children's lives was erased in the eyes of the public. People began to assume he was uninvolved, uninterested, or had been cut out entirely. This lack of visibility led to speculation, and soon, rumors took hold. On social media and in comment sections, people began asking questions and making assumptions. Some claimed Cody had gone out west, a phrase often used in Canada to suggest someone was running from responsibility, working in unstable conditions, or disconnected from their family. Others speculated he had a criminal past or had spent time in jail. He was quickly painted as an absent, reckless, or even dangerous figure, despite having no official charges or accusations against him. It didn't stop there. As the weeks went on and the case remained unsolved, Cody became a quiet target of suspicion. Questions began to surface. Could the biological father have taken the kids? Was this some attempt to win back custody by force? Even with no evidence pointing in his direction, the vacuum left by his silence became a breeding ground for worst-case assumptions. Cody's family, his side, was treated no differently. Not a single member of the paternal family had spoken publicly. There were no interviews, no social media statements, no emotional pleas from a grandmother or aunt. In a case where the maternal side was vocal, giving interviews, posting updates, even defending each other, Cody's family was invisible. During community searches and media coverage, no one mentioned them. They weren't seen on camera. They weren't part of the narrative. This lack of presence only deepened the perception that Cody's family didn't care or didn't want to be involved. For many, they weren't just silent, they were outsiders. And in a high-profile missing children case, being on the outside means being suspicious. Some viewers expressed outright disdain. If he's really the father, where the hell is he? Others were more cautious, but still uncertain. Maybe he was pushed out of their lives. But why hasn't he said anything? However, that uncomfortable silence began to shift when, for the first time, a voice finally broke through, this time from the biological grandmother of the children.
I am the grandmother of Lily and Jack. I am the grandmother on the biological father's side.
When Belynda Gray, Lily and Jack's paternal grandmother, finally broke her silence, she didn't begin with theories or accusations. She began, simply, with how she found out.
How did you find out that Lily and Jack were missing?
The mama of my grandson called me. We were in town. She asked if I heard the news. she sent me the article that was on Facebook showing the kids missing. I couldn't call Malaya yet, so I waited till we got home. And I called, well, I didn't call her, I texted her. And she told me that, yes, that the kids were missing, that they've been missing since this morning. I was in a state of panic, shock. But in the back of my mind, I kept saying, well, they'll find them. I mean,
It was a Facebook post, a news article, a message link sent to her by her granddaughter. That's how she found out that 2 of her grandchildren were missing. For anyone watching this case unfold, that detail alone is telling. She didn't hear it from Malaya. She didn't hear it from Daniel. She didn't hear it from law enforcement. She heard it the way strangers did. And honestly, try to imagine that for a moment. Finding out your grandchildren vanished, not from family, not from police, but from a headline someone forwarded to your phone. No warning, no explanation, just a surge of dread and confusion. She describes the moment in one word: shock, then panic, then helplessness. Who wouldn't feel that? Who wouldn't be overwhelmed by that kind of blindside? It's not just heartbreaking, it's humiliating. But that wasn't the end. A few hours later, CMP arrived at her door, not to offer comfort or support, but to wake up her son Cody, to question him, to bring him into it.
and help with the search. It was around between 3 and 3:30 in the morning. A couple of cop cars pull into the driveway. The lights wake me up that I'm a fairly light sleeper, so I see the cars pull in, so I knew what it was. So they come inside. They only stood in the kitchen. They wanted me to wake Cody up, and they wanted to know when was the last time he had seen the kids, and that they were just making sure that the kids weren't here. And then they left.
She had barely processed what was happening, and already, the walls were closing in. The home she thought was safe became a target of suspicion. And in that instant, Belynda's role in this case changed. She wasn't just a grandmother anymore. She was now part of the investigation. From her account, we see a woman completely blindsided. A woman left out of every chain of communication. But also, a woman who still ran toward the chaos, who showed up at the search, and who never stopped asking what really happened. It's easy to criticize people from the outside. But in Belynda's case, her reaction wasn't cold or defensive. It was raw. It was honest. It was what any grandmother with a beating heart would feel. Her words remind us that some people were never given the chance to be involved, only judged for not being visible. And they make us ask, if she had to find out on a post, what else was being kept from her, and why?
I'm assuming that they'd find them. So I told her, well, we'll head out first thing in the morning and help with the search. So we showed up Saturday morning, me and my sister, and we met up with my daughter, and we started, well, I asked Malaya, I said, Malaya, I said, you know your kids. Nobody knows their kids like their mom. Where do your kids normally go to play out in the yard? What direction do they usually like to explore? And she said, well, they always play up in the little woods right on the side. I said, well, okay. I said, we'll start from that point and we'll work our way out.
When Belynda Gray arrived at the search site that Saturday morning, she didn't come with cameras or press. She came with her sister and asked questions. The first thing she did was ask Malaya where the kids usually played. A simple question, a reasonable one. But, according to her, Malaya didn't have much to say. No clear direction, no urgency, just a vague gesture. That detail alone is unsettling. What kind of mother, just days after her children vanished, can't point out the exact places they loved to play? How is it that strangers knew more about the surrounding terrain than the woman who lived there? As they entered the woods, Belynda described something else, something more physical, more visceral.
We had spoken to a search and rescue, and we weren't allowed on the other side because that's where they were searching at the time. So we just started combing through the woods up through there. We were gone for a couple of hours. I'm yelling for Lily and Jack. We always called Jack Jackie Boy. And yeah, that went on for a few hours, but those woods, I started to feel that I can't see them being in the woods. There's trees everywhere. You literally have to climb over trees, climb under bushes. It is really, really thick.
As she told, the forest was thick, choked with fallen trees. Dense, heavy brush. You had to climb over trunks, crawl under branches. This wasn't a child-friendly landscape, and this raises a critical question. Could two kids, ages 4 and 6, have made it through that terrain alone? According to Belynda, the answer is no. She says clearly, if they were in those woods, we would have found them in 10 minutes. And that statement cuts through all the noise. She's not speculating. She was there. She was yelling their names. She was searching. And she found nothing, not even a sock, not a footprint, not a single cry echoing through the trees. It wasn't just the lack of evidence. It was the feeling, the absence of life, of energy, of presence. It didn't feel like the kids had been there. It felt like they never made it there in the first place. But perhaps the most troubling piece isn't the terrain. It's Malaya's detachment, the lack of direction, the absence of panic. There's no record of her leading searches. No reports of her screaming her kids' names through the woods. Just stillness. Quiet. And from Belynda's perspective, that silence said more than any theory ever could. Because if you're a mother, and your babies are out there somewhere, cold, scared, alone, you don't just stand still. You scream. You run. You tear the world apart. But that didn't happen here. And it forces us to ask, were they ever in those woods to begin with? Or did the search start in the wrong place? Because the story started with a lie. When Belynda Gray speaks about the relationship between her son Cody and Malaya, what emerges is not a tale of violence or chaos. It's something quieter, something more common, and maybe more dangerous for being so easily overlooked, a slow unraveling.
And so how long were your son and Malaya together?
3.5 years, I think it was, yeah. I thought they were the picture-perfect family.
They were together for about 3.5 years. Not a short-term fling. Not a brief mistake. Long enough to build a family. Long enough to bring 2 children into the world. Long enough for things to feel permanent, until they weren't.
Then Malaya started to tell me that they were having problems and she wasn't happy. She told me that she wasn't happy and she thinks she's gonna leave. And I told her that we supported whatever she decides, that one good parent is way better than 2 broken ones.
According to Belynda, the end didn't come with a bang. There was no dramatic custody battle. No public fallout. Just a conversation. One good parent is better than 2 broken ones.
And then how did that change your relationship with Lily and Jack?
I thought it was going to change, but it didn't. Yeah, it didn't change. Malaya, she was a sweetheart. Anytime we wanted to see the kids, she'd come by for a visit. She'd bring them by all the time. It was actually really, really good.
So when was the last time you saw the children?
A 1.5 years, almost, really, it's about 1 year and 9 months. I looked at the fact that when her and my son separated, my son walked away. He chose to walk away, that she wanted sole custody of the kids. So she petitioned the courts for sole custody, and when she did that, he said he was done.
There was no fight for the kids. No desperate plea to stay involved. Cody walked away. Not out of apathy, but, it seems, out of resignation. Malaya wanted sole custody, and he gave it to her. No court. No lawyers. No resistance. He left. And he didn't see his children again for almost 3 years. To some, that might look like abandonment. To others, it might look like a man being pushed out of his children's lives by a mother who wanted total control. Belynda doesn't say it in harsh terms, but the subtext is there. She describes how Malaya used to bring the kids around all the time. How she was kind, respectful, warm. But then something shifted. Suddenly, visits stopped. Photos were removed. Contact ended. And yet, despite the pain and the distance, Belynda still speaks of Malaya with grace, calling her a sweetheart, and remembering how she once brought joy into their lives by simply showing up with the kids. It's not bitterness we hear in her voice. It's sadness, and a sense of something precious that was slowly taken away, And the only thing more painful than losing your children is losing them quietly, watching the door close, knowing you don't have the legal right or the power to open it again. In a case defined by voices, press briefings, social media posts, and public speculation, Cody Sullivan remained silent. And that silence became its own story. People started filling in the blanks with rumors. He was in jail. He'd run out west. He had a record. He was dangerous. But when Belynda Gray, his mother, finally spoke, she dismantled that image in just a few quiet sentences.
My son is Cody Sullivan. He's not in jail. He's never been out west. He does not have a criminal record. And right now he's living with me. He has been for 9 months.
Cody isn't in jail. He never went out west. He has no criminal record. He's not a fugitive. He's not unstable. He's not the threat people made him out to be. So who is he? One more time, according to Belynda, Cody is a man who walked away, not out of cruelty, but out of surrender. When the relationship with Malaya ended, she asked for sole custody, and he gave it to her. No legal fight, no resistance, no court battle. He stepped back.
How did you deal with that?
Really, to be honest, maybe I didn't deal good enough with it. I looked at the fact that when her and my son separated, my son walked away. He chose to walk away, that she wanted sole custody of the kids. So she petitioned the courts for sole custody, and when she did that, he said he was done.
To some, that looks weak. To others, it looks like restraint. But either way, the result was the same. He lost access to his kids.
So I didn't have a problem. My son was a little upset about it. He said they made him feel like he did something wrong, and he said he hadn't seen the kids in 3 years. So he was a little upset about it, that he said that they really come at him hard. They wanted to know what her favorite color was, and he said, they were babies when I seen them last. He said, she was just learning what she wanted to figure out to eat. I don't know what her color is.
He hadn't seen Lily and Jack in nearly 3 years. Not because he didn't care, but because he was cut off. And the pain of that, you can hear it in Belynda's voice when she says, she was just learning what she wanted to eat. It's the sound of a family watching their children grow up from the sidelines, without birthdays, without phone calls, without updates. Cody didn't have resources. He didn't have legal representation. He didn't even have a social media presence to defend himself. He had a past with Malaya. Then, nothing. When the kids went missing, he was one of the first people questioned. He was one of the last people anyone defended. It paints a picture of a man not dangerous, but discarded. And when someone disappears from a child's life, it's easy to assume they left on their own terms. But sometimes, people don't disappear. They're erased. And maybe that's what happened to Cody Sullivan. Not a monster. Not a hero. Just a father shut out, then blamed when the worst finally happened. If you thought grief alone was the hardest part of losing a child, try being treated like a suspect just for asking where they went. That's what happened to Belynda Gray and her son Cody. Not as criminals. Not as witnesses. But as targets from the very beginning.
Were you ever formally questioned?
Yes.
So then it's about a month after Lily and Jack are last seen that they come and formally question you.
So it's about 3 weeks. They questioned Cody for an hour and a half in the vehicle, and then they questioned me for 2 hours in the vehicle.
According to Belynda, just hours after she found out from the Post that her grandchildren were missing, police officers pulled into her driveway, not to offer comfort or updates, but to wake Cody up. No warning, no explanation. Just knock knock, get your son up, we need to talk. And that wasn't a one-time conversation. Weeks later, RCMP brought Cody in for a 90-minute interrogation. They grilled him, pressed him, tried to corner him. Meanwhile, Belynda herself was questioned for over 2 hours, a grandmother, panicked and grieving, now sitting under fluorescent lights trying to justify. What, exactly? She wasn't there when it happened. Cody hadn't seen the children in years. Neither of them had custody or even access. And yet, they were being treated like suspects.
So I didn't have a problem. My son was a little upset about it. He said they made him feel like he did something wrong, and he said he hadn't seen the kids in 3 years. So he was a little upset about it, that he said that they really come at him hard. They wanted to know what her favorite color was, and he said, they were babies when I seen them last. He said, she was just learning what she wanted to figure out to eat. I don't know what her color is. So yeah, he was pretty upset.
According to Belynda, the tone wasn't supportive. It was accusatory. They didn't ask, "Do you know anything?" They asked, "What color was her favorite shirt?" "When's the last time you saw her smile?" Questions designed not to gather facts, but to expose cracks, to trip them up, to make them doubt themselves. Cody told his mother he felt like he had done something wrong, even when he hadn't. That's what guilt by association looks like, when your mere connection to a tragedy becomes a reason to suspect you. Belynda says RCMP gave them nothing, no information, no clarity. Each time she asked, the answer was the same vague line: "It's under investigation. We can't say anything." And while Malaya and Daniel were publicly posting, moving, reshaping the narrative, Cody and Linda were locked in a kind of institutional silence, spoken to by police, ignored by the public, excluded from the story. And then, weeks later, a sudden shift. The police told Cody they weren't looking his way anymore. No apology, no explanation. Just, "We're done with you."
So yeah, he was pretty upset.
Have they ever talked to him again since then?
A couple of days ago, they had contact and they told him that they weren't looking his way anymore, that everything was fine.
And have they ever given you any information?
No, it's always the same thing.
But the damage had already been done. You don't get to erase suspicion like a chalkboard. Not after putting someone that kind of emotional grinder. So what does this tell us? It tells us that the RCMP isn't just looking for answers, they're chasing the truth. But doing it with a pressure that feels punishing. They move fast. They push hard. They dig deep. And maybe that shows their determination, a refusal to let any possibility slip away. But it also shows something else. When you investigate with that kind of force, people get hurt. Belynda and Cody weren't charged. They weren't even witnesses to the event. But they were treated like suspects, not because there was proof, but because there was space to apply pressure. And in a case where public outrage is high and answers are few, that pressure needs to land somewhere. It landed on the one man who hadn't seen his kids in years. Not because he had something to hide, but because he had no one to stand up for him. When Belynda Gray speaks about Malaya, it's not with hatred. There's no venom, no bitterness. What you hear, instead, is confusion.
We come back out and I went in to see Malaya again. I assumed she was in shock. She was very non-emotional, very just flat, monotone. But Malaya's very soft-spoken anyway, that she's not usually excitable. I thought that's made her a really great mom. She was an excellent mom. She never raised her kid or voice at the kids. That it was always, "Now Lily, what did Mommy say?" And I used to think, now if anybody's meant to be a mom, it was her. A part of me still feels that.
A kind of stunned dissonance between the woman she thought she knew and the one she encountered after the children disappeared. She describes the old Malaya as warm, polite, kind. The type of young mother who would bring the kids by often, smiling, showing love, and keeping the bond between families alive. In her words, she was a sweetheart. But something changed. After the breakup, Malaya slowly pulled away, not just from Cody, but from Belynda too. The visits stopped. Photos were taken down. Contact faded. And still, Belynda doesn't speak ill of her. She respected the boundaries. She understood that breakups are hard. She stepped back. But the silence stuck. Then came the day of the disappearance. And when Belynda came to the house, this time, not to visit, but to help find her missing grandchildren, what she saw and felt was different. Deeply different.
Why only a part of you still feels that? What do you mean?
After seeing the place, seeing the condition of the home, It was like the total opposite of what I knew of Malaya. She was always clean, very clean about herself, about the kids, about her home. This home looked more like a camp. Now, I don't know if it's from all the people that were there, because I didn't show up till the day after, but it was very unkempt. I was pretty surprised.
She describes Malaya as flat, emotionless, detached, not panicked, not desperate, just blank. And the house, messy, chaotic, unrecognizable. It didn't match the woman she remembered. It didn't match the kind of mom she once praised. It felt off, and in true crime cases, it's often not what people say. It's what they don't say. The absence of grief, the absence of direction, the absence of urgency. Belynda's not accusing Malaya. She doesn't make wild claims, but she's clearly troubled by the gap between who Malaya was and who she became. It raises questions. Was Malaya overwhelmed? Was she hiding something? Or was she simply shutting down, unable to process what had happened? None of those answers come easily. But Belynda's observations add weight to a growing pattern. A feeling that something about this case doesn't line up. And when even someone who once called you sweetheart begins to doubt the story you're telling, that says something. Let's take some minutes for the precious children we are looking for. When Belynda Gray talks about Lily and Jack, her tone changes. It's no longer cautious or analytical. It's not guarded. It's just grief.
Lily is, she was my little dream girl, that's the first granddaughter. And I love that she had the brown hair and she had a space between her teeth, which I had when I was a kid. So yeah, she was our little princess. Jack was such a sober, serious little baby that he didn't like to smile. You could tickle him and he would look at you ever so serious, like he was really studying you.
Pure, unfiltered love wrapped in devastation. She calls Lily my little dream girl, our little princess. Not just a child, a presence, a spirit, a light in the family. And Jack was the quiet one, the thinker, a sober, serious little baby. He was really studying you. It's a haunting description, because it gives you an image not just of who he was, but of what the world lost when he vanished. In these words, we don't just see affection, we see memory. Real, textured, specific memory. These aren't abstract praises. These are the kinds of things you only say about children you truly knew and deeply loved. And then comes the line that hits like a punch to the chest.
There is nothing more pure and innocent than a 6 and a 4-year-old.
There's no rage in her voice, no revenge, just sorrow and clarity. Because in all the noise around this case, polygraphs, theories, suspects, timelines, it's easy to forget the core truth. 2 children are gone, and they weren't statistics. They weren't symbols. They were Lily. They were Jack. They laughed. They cried. They learned new words. They made people's lives better just by existing. And now they're nowhere. No trace. No goodbye. Belynda's words remind us what's really at stake. This isn't about internet drama or who lied first. It's about 2 lives stolen from their future. And when she says, they deserved better, you can't help but agree. Because they did. They still do.
Why are you so sure they're not in the woods?
I have children, I have grandchildren, and I see what kids are like through the woods. There's no reason for any child to wander deep into the woods. There's just not. I think somebody hurt these kids. I think somebody hurt them.
Belynda Gray isn't a detective. She's not a forensic expert. She's a grandmother. A woman who once held those children in her arms. Who saw how they played, how they listened, how they stuck together like glue, especially little Jack, always looking up to his big sister. And that's exactly why, despite everything, despite the lack of confessions, despite no clear evidence, she doesn't believe they just wandered off. She was there, in the woods, calling out their names until her voice cracked, climbing through fallen trees, thick brush, tangled branches, and all she found was silence. No child noises, no movement, no tiny footprints, just that gut deep, unmistakable stillness. The kind that tells you, no one has been here. According to her, if Riley and Jack were out there, they would have been found. It's not just logic, it's instinct. She knows those kids. She knows their personalities. And she knows they wouldn't just wander off into the deep woods without someone noticing. But it's not just the terrain. It's not just the timeline. It's the feeling. The sense that this wasn't random. That this wasn't an accident. That something, or someone, intentionally removed those children. She says it plain that she doesn't think they're in those woods. She thinks somebody hurt these kids. And when she says it, she doesn't sound angry. She sounds resigned. Like someone who's carried the weight of knowing something no one wants to admit. This isn't wild speculation. It's not a conspiracy. It's a quiet, heartbreaking observation from someone who knew those kids, not from a case file, but from bedtime stories and birthday hugs. So when someone like Belynda, calm, reasonable, respectful, becomes the first person to say it out loud, we have to stop and ask, is this really a case of missing children? Or is it a crime that's been dressed up to look like one? Uncover mysteries. The interview with Belynda Gray didn't just offer a perspective. It filled in the silence that had clouded this case for weeks. Her words quietly answered questions many had been asking, but no one could confirm. What really happened between Cody and Malaya? Why was Cody absent? What has RCMP been doing behind the scenes? And most painfully, were those kids ever truly lost in the woods? For Cody Sullivan, he was a blank space in this case, a father whose name rarely came up, and when it did, it was only in whispers, often laced with judgment. He was the invisible man in a very public tragedy. Speculation filled the void. Maybe he was on the run. Maybe he had a record. Maybe he was dangerous. Or worst of all, maybe he just didn't care. What his mother revealed painted a very different picture from the one the internet had created. First and foremost, Cody does not have a criminal record. Belynda was direct about that. No prison time, no charges, no secret past. The rumors about him being in and out of jail, or West avoiding responsibility. False. Those stories weren't just exaggerated, they were flat out wrong. And yet, because Cody stayed silent, those rumors stuck to him like glue. People assumed the worst, and because no one from his side of the family had spoken, it became easy to frame Cody as the parent who walked away. The one who didn't fight for his children. The one who didn't care. But Belynda revealed the heartbreaking truth. Cody didn't give up. He was pushed out. After the breakup with Malaya, she severed ties completely. She stopped bringing the children around. She stopped sharing photos. There was no co-parenting, no updates, no visits. Belynda hadn't seen her grandchildren in nearly 3 years. And Cody? He made the difficult decision not to pursue custody or escalate the conflict, believing it was better for the kids to have peace, even if it meant his absence. That's not abandonment. That's restraint. And now, with hindsight, it's become another layer of grief. What's more, Cody's whereabouts have been confirmed. He had been living with his mother, Belynda, in the same house for the past 9 months. That detail alone puts to rest the wild theories about him traveling, hiding, or acting suspicious. He wasn't off the grid. He was home. And he didn't refuse to cooperate. He sat through an extensive RCMP interview. He answered everything. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't try to deflect. And in the end, the RCMP told him he was no longer a person of interest. Not because he was lucky, but because there was nothing to find. So now we know, Cody Sullivan is not a suspect. He is not dangerous. He is not the villain in this story. He is a father who was pushed to the sidelines and then blamed for not being on the field. He is a man who lost his children long before they went missing, and now lives with that silence twice over. As more information emerges, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The circle of suspicion is shrinking. And with every new piece of clarity, that spotlight begins to focus more sharply on Malaya. First, as mentioned, we now know Cody Sullivan and his side of the family were investigated by RCMP early on. Belynda Gray confirmed this. Cody was interrogated. Belynda herself was questioned multiple times. And though not officially announced by law enforcement, Cody was told he was no longer considered a main person of interest. Whatever doubts had been hanging over him were no longer in the air. Then there's Daniel Martel. We've learned through multiple sources that Daniel took a polygraph test and passed. While a polygraph isn't admissible in court, it is often a powerful tool in guiding investigations, and in this case, it seems to have been enough to significantly lower suspicions surrounding him. So who's left? That question is more uncomfortable than it is rhetorical, because the only central figure, without a clear statement of elimination, without a public defense, and without signs of deep cooperation with RCMP, is Malaya. There's no indication she's taken a polygraph, no report that she's been publicly cleared, no confirmation from RCMP or family that she's been ruled out. In a case that has seemingly worked through every person closest to the children, she is the last major figure still standing in the zone of uncertainty. And then there are the emotional red flags. Daniel described her behavior before the disappearance as unstable, possibly postpartum depression. Daniel's mother went further, saying she seemed like she was hiding something. And Belynda Gray described her as emotionally flat, like she had no soul. 3 people, from both sides of the family, noted something deeply off. Some might explain her state as the result of profound shock and trauma defense no one would dismiss lightly. But when emotional detachment appears long before the tragedy, it becomes harder to ignore. Beyond emotional state, Malaya was also one of the last known people to see the children alive. No neighbors, no cameras, no outside witnesses placed the kids anywhere beyond her account. And in any missing child case, the last adult to have contact becomes the first person investigators need to eliminate. Yet in this case, she hasn't been. Adding more weight to this, there were no physical signs that the children wandered off. No footprints. No cries, no sightings, no footage. Nothing. The house was quiet. The woods were silent. And when there's no evidence of an outside factor, suspicion turns inward toward the people inside that home. To complicate it further, observers have noted inconsistencies in Malaya's statements, small shifts in the timeline of when she woke up, when she discovered the kids missing, when she contacted Daniel. In a high-stakes investigation, those shifts matter. They don't prove guilt, but they raise eyebrows, especially when paired with emotional flatness and a lack of public engagement. Speaking of which, her absence from search efforts and her demeanor during public appearances have stood in stark contrast to what many expect from a grieving mother. Where was the urgency? The desperation? The appeal to the public? In many ways, the void of visible emotion mixed with her complete silence has only fed public suspicion. And maybe most telling of all, no one is standing up for her. Not family. Not friends. Not one person has come forward to say, she's struggling, but she's innocent. That silence, too, speaks volumes. RCMP, too, has remained silent. There's been no formal statement ruling anyone out. But their actions suggest a method, process of elimination. Cody's out. Daniel's cleared. If the outer ring is shrinking, all that's left is the center. And the center, now, is Malaya. This statement of Belynda Gray is simple, direct, but powerful because it doesn't come from the press, police, or public speculation. It comes from someone who knew the children personally, someone who had raised their father, someone who has felt the weight of silence, confusion, and helplessness from the sidelines for weeks. And most importantly, someone who's finally speaking out. For Belynda, the idea that Lily, age 6, and Jack, age 4, simply walked off into the woods is more than just implausible, it's impossible. And when you start laying out the facts she presents, that belief starts to look more like a conclusion. First, there's the matter of age and behavior. Belynda describes Lily as a thoughtful, bright, and protective big sister. She was the kind of child who looked out for others, especially her little brother. Jack, on the other hand, was quiet and shy. He followed Lily everywhere and rarely made decisions on his own. According to Belynda, Lily was raised with a healthy fear of the forest surrounding their home. She knew not to go near it, especially without an adult. So the idea that this pair of young children, in early May, when the ground was still cold and wet, would slip outside unnoticed and enter the woods on their own, in silence. It just doesn't track. Lily wouldn't have led Jack out into danger. She would have known better. That's not just a grandmother's belief. That's based on everything Belynda observed about her behavior, her instincts, and her attachment to her brother. Then there's the question of evidence, or rather, the lack of it. Belynda points out, rightly, that there were no signs of departure. No tiny footprints leading away from the house. No drag marks. No broken branches or trampled brush. No articles of clothing, toys, or even a shoe left behind. No signs of distress. No screams heard by neighbors. And perhaps most strikingly, no footage. No security camera, home device, or witness ever placed those children outside the house that morning. Even the RCMP, early in the case, acknowledged that there is no evidence the children left the home. That statement alone should have reshaped the public narrative. But instead, the theory of two children simply wandering into the woods persisted, likely because it's easier to believe in accident than in harm. Belynda also brings attention to the timing. The children were reportedly last seen around dawn, early hours, before the sun was fully up. It was cold, damp, quiet. Not a time when kids that age are typically awake, let alone planning an escape. And even if they did wake up, how would they have opened the door without a sound? How would they have walked into the forest without hesitation? To Belynda, and to many others watching closely, the answer is clear: they didn't. Add to this one final point, the absence of motive. According to Belynda, there was no conflict in the home. No threats. No reason for the children to run. No pattern of them wandering off. They were comfortable. Jack in particular was known to cling to adults. The kind of child who didn't even like going from room to room without a grown-up. If that's true, how could he have walked into the forest without making a sound? All of this leads back to the same chilling conclusion. Lily and Jack didn't vanish into the woods. They were taken. Or harmed. And whoever did it didn't leave a trace. When the woods give no answers, it's time to look closer at what's inside the home. A New Hope. In stark contrast to the heartbreaking doubt expressed by Belynda Gray, who firmly believes that Lily and Jack did not simply wander off into the woods, another case, nearly identical in its eerie details, has delivered a sliver of hope. If the wandering theory still holds even the smallest chance of being true, then the story of Claire Bell just lit a new flame. Claire, just 3 years old, disappeared under shockingly similar circumstances. A quiet Sunday. A familiar environment. No witnesses. No surveillance footage. A child vanishing without a trace. For days, the nation watched with bated breath, fearing the worst. But then, the unthinkable happened. She was found. Alive. From the very beginning, the disappearance of Claire Bell didn't follow the usual pattern. It wasn't just about what happened, but how the people closest to her reacted. And that reaction, or lack thereof, became its own kind of mystery. The first thing many noticed was the emotional tone of Claire's mother. In televised interviews and video clips shared online, she didn't look or sound like a mother in panic. There were no tears, no frantic pleas, no desperate energy you'd expect from someone whose 3-year-old daughter had just vanished. Instead, her demeanor was described as eerily calm, her face still and expressionless. While people coped differently, the absence of visible distress was unsettling. It made some wonder, was this shock, or something else? What made the suspicion grow were the inconsistencies in the story. At times, Claire's mother said she vanished right outside the house. In other versions, she claimed Claire was near the grandmother. The timeline wavered too. First it was just a few seconds, then several minutes. These might sound like small differences, but in missing child investigations, exact timing is everything. Even more confusing was the question of who was actually watching Claire. One moment it was the mom, then the grandma, but no clear answer was ever confirmed. Meanwhile, The rest of the family stayed silent. Not a single relative stepped forward in the early days. No father. No aunts or uncles. No grandparents. There were no press conferences showing a united family front, no heartfelt pleas for help. While police and volunteers organized massive search efforts, the family seemed strangely absent, not just physically, but emotionally too. Online, people took notice. Body language analysts and everyday viewers picked apart every clip, pointing out odd behavior, like avoiding eye contact, repeating the same phrases, or showing zero vocal emotion. Many began to question whether the story being told was the full truth. Some even floated theories that Claire was never really missing, but had been hidden, or moved, or worse, by someone she knew. Adding fuel to the fire, there was no evidence the family helped with search efforts in those first critical hours. They weren't spotted handing out flyers. No one saw them canvassing the area or joining police on the ground. That kind of passivity, especially from a parent, rubbed people the wrong way. In contrast, total strangers were combing parks and scouring back roads, looking for Claire. Then there's the biggest mystery of all. Claire vanished without a sound. A 3-year-old girl doesn't just disappear in total silence. There were no screams, no rustling, no struggle. Just gone. And strangely, a vehicle parked nearby, the one later connected to her being found, wasn't even checked right away. That delay raised serious questions. Was it a mistake, or was it overlooked on purpose? Even more bizarre, the father was never mentioned. Not once. No public statements, no appearances, no visible involvement. That silence screamed just as loudly as the mother's composure. Where was he? Why wasn't he speaking out? And when Claire's mother did speak, her words felt rehearsed. She was right there. We turned and she was gone. Those lines were repeated over and over, like someone trying to remember a script. There was no rawness in her voice. No cracks. No signs of someone holding back tears. Finally, even the basics were missing, like what Claire was wearing. Descriptions were vague, lacking colored details or standout identifiers. In most missing cases, clothing details are crucial for public searches. The lack of that info delayed how the public could help, and some think that delay wasn't accidental. From the moment Claire Bell vanished, the clock began ticking, but it seems that the system charged with protecting her wasn't quite ready to race against time. Despite the emotional chaos of a missing toddler, the initial response from authorities reflected hesitation more than urgency. One of the first critical issues was the delay in recognizing the urgency of Claire's disappearance. Claire vanished under clearly suspicious circumstances. She disappeared within seconds, from a known location, without witnesses or sound. Yet, there was no immediate escalation to full-scale emergency response. Instead of triggering an urgent, structured search, early efforts appeared fragmented and slow, allowing vital time to slip away. Compounding this was the failure to secure and search the area properly right after the incident. A suspicious car parked near the site, which would later become a key clue, wasn't checked immediately. In child abduction cases, perimeter control in the first few hours is crucial. This delay suggested a lack of tactical readiness and may have cost investigators a key opportunity to act on a fresh lead. Then came the issue of poor communication with the public. Descriptions of Claire's clothing were inconsistent, vague, or incomplete. There was no mention of special identifying marks or items Claire may have been holding, like a favorite toy. For the public, these are often the details that make a difference, the details that trigger recognition. Without them, community efforts were hampered from the start. Even more concerning was the assumption that Claire had wandered off on her own, an assumption that shifted focus away from critical leads. Though she disappeared in a parking lot surrounded by cars, investigators initially pursued the theory that she had simply walked into a nearby bush or alley. This not only delayed vehicle checks, but also failed to consider the more statistically probable scenario of abduction, especially in the absence of any sound or visual trail. Adding to public confusion were the conflicting statements from witnesses, especially from Claire's mother. Her timeline of events and role in supervising Claire shifted subtly in different interviews. At one point she said Claire was right beside her. Later, she claimed Claire had been with another relative. These discrepancies were never addressed publicly by the RCMP, leaving the public with more questions than answers. One of the most surprising issues was the lack of immediate use of the Amber Alert system. There is no evidence or public record suggesting that a full alert was issued at the very beginning. In abduction scenarios, the first few hours are vital, and Amber Alerts can mobilize public awareness across vast areas. A delay in broadcasting that alert can severely diminish recovery chances, especially if a vehicle is involved. Public trust was further strained by infrequent communication from RCMP. In cases like this, daily press conferences or detailed updates are expected. Instead, the RCMP issued limited statements, prompting speculation and rumor mongering online, without clear, consistent updates. The community was left to fill in the gaps themselves, and that rarely leads to truth. The mobilization of the community was also late and uncoordinated. While hundreds eventually joined the search, early efforts lacked central organization. There were no clearly defined zones, no printed maps, no real-time instructions from officials. Volunteers often wandered without direction, a waste of crucial energy in the golden window of recovery. What makes this even more troubling is the lack of thorough vetting of household members. According to transcript sources, police did not interrogate the mother or family members rigorously in the initial hours. In any missing child case, the last known caregiver is always the first person to be scrutinized thoroughly. That didn't happen here. Why? There were also critical omissions in gathering and sharing surveillance footage. There's no evidence the police immediately requested footage from homes and businesses near the disappearance site. In a suburban area, home security cameras are everywhere. Early review of those videos might have revealed a car, a shadow, or a direction of movement. But the silence on this point leaves a gaping hole in the investigation timeline. Even after reports of a suspicious vehicle nearby, there was no sketch, no plate number, and no appeal to drivers in the area to submit dashcam footage. This again raises the question, were all possibilities really exhausted? RCMP also failed to coordinate quickly with national missing child resources, like Child Find Canada or specialized abduction recovery units. The weight of the operation remained mostly on local law enforcement and civilian volunteers, reducing access to national expertise and resources that could have strengthened early efforts. Finally, there was the failure to counter misinformation. With so many unknowns, online speculation exploded, including disturbing rumors that Claire was never present that day, or that a family member was involved. But without a published timeline, confirmed sightings, or official visual records, these rumors thrived. After days of confusion, fear, and frustration, June 18, 2025, became the turning point. At exactly 2:06 p.m., hope was no longer just a word, it became a reality. A drone operated by the Ontario Provincial Police spotted something unexpected along the side of Highway 417, near exit 66 in St. Albert, Ontario. Alone, weak, but alive, 3-year-old Claire Bell was found. The location shocked many. St. Albert is more than 150 kilometers from Montreal and about 50 kilometers from the Quebec border. It raised immediate questions. How did a toddler get that far? Who brought her there? And why was she left alone? When police reached her, Claire was conscious and responsive. She could speak to officers, which provided immense relief. Despite being dehydrated and visibly exhausted, she had no life-threatening injuries. Officers administered water, snacks, and basic first aid right on site, before rushing her to a local hospital for further medical attention. The fact that she was even capable of communication after such an ordeal was described by responders as a miracle. Later that evening, the SQ and OPP held a joint press conference. It wasn't just a celebration. It was a moment to thank every single person who contributed, no matter how small. Capt. Benoit Richard from the SQ and SGT, Sean Cameron from the OPP, both stressed that this rescue was the result of public involvement. They repeated a phrase that now carried real weight. Every tip matters. And in Claire's case, it truly did. One of the most emotionally powerful images came not from police, but from the people on the ground. Volunteer searcher Danny Chaput described the exact moment the news broke. People burst into tears. Others hugged, screamed with joy, or shouted, "Hoorah!" A group of school children riding past the SQ command post in Les Ca Dres even erupted in cheers when they heard. For days, this small community had carried the weight of uncertainty. In that moment, they were finally allowed to breathe again. After being stabilized, Claire was reunited with her father, Matt Bell, and other family members at the hospital. Matt later posted a brief but heartfelt message on Instagram, thanking the public for their help and asking for privacy so his family could begin the healing process. The relief was genuine, but the questions had only just begun. Authorities confirmed that Claire would soon be interviewed by trained specialists to help piece together what had happened during the nearly 4 days she was missing. This would include trying to establish her physical and emotional condition, her whereabouts during those days, and whether she was with someone else or moved multiple times. Key uncertainties remain. One critical question is what happened between June 15th, when she was reportedly last seen in Ontario, and June 18th, when she was found. That 3-day gap could hold the answers to whether Claire was being hidden, whether others were involved, and what conditions she endured. Another pressing issue is the role of Rachel Todd, the woman currently charged with child abandonment. Was she the only person involved? Did she act alone? And why was Claire found so far from home? Finally, while Claire's survival is reason to celebrate, the focus now shifts to her long-term care. What psychological support will she need? Where will she live? Who will be entrusted with her safety moving forward? In the end, finding Claire Bell was nothing short of a miracle. But like all miracles, it came wrapped in unanswered questions, lingering doubts, and a renewed demand for accountability. The community rejoiced, but the search for truth was far from over. The stories of Claire Bell and the Sullivan children, Jack and Lily, offer two paths, one that ends with a miracle, and one still waiting for answers. But together, they teach us something deeper. The truth is often buried not just in facts, but in silence. From Belynda Gray's interview, we learn that absence doesn't mean guilt, and presence doesn't mean innocence. Cody Sullivan, once ignored and even vilified, was quietly investigated, cleared, and supported by the one person who chose to speak with dignity instead of drama, his mother. Her words didn't point fingers. They revealed gaps in public perception, in media narratives, and in the way we often rush to assign blame based on who speaks loudest, not who suffers most quietly. Her interview reminded us to look at what hasn't been said, and to ask why. Then, there's Claire Bell. Found alive after days of fear and confusion, her rescue wasn't just a triumph of search teams. It was a moment born from community action, technology, and most of all, persistence. Her case exposed the flaws in early response efforts, but it also reminded us what's possible when people don't give up. Together, these two stories show the duality of hope and heartbreak. They urge us to listen more closely, question more carefully, and never underestimate the power of the quiet voices, the overlooked parent, the silent witness, the lost child. Sometimes the most powerful breakthroughs don't come from force, but from patience, empathy, and the courage to speak when no one else does. That's the legacy Belynda Gray leaves, and the miracle Claire Bell gave back. And now, we turn our hearts to the ones still missing, Lily and Jack Sullivan. Dear Lily, dear Jack, wherever you are, we pray you're safe. We pray someone is holding you gently, speaking to you kindly, and keeping you warm. We pray your eyes still carry light, and your hearts still know love. To those searching, don't give up. Hope is not just a word, it's an anchor. For every parent waiting, for every neighbor watching, for every stranger who still cares, hold on. May justice be patient, but relentless. May truth be revealed in time. And may Lily and Jack for the arms that miss them most. Until then, we will keep praying. We will keep hoping. We will not forget.